River Godavari. River Godavari carries huge amount of water into the Bay of Bengal unutilized. That is the reason you can see Andhra Pradesh has been consistently working and fighting and trying to establish the Polavaram project. That particular amount of rainfall is not sufficient to cater to the needs of the population. They have strategically built their infrastructure in such a manner they can hold almost 250% of their annual rainfall in the reservoirs. The national stage for groundwater extraction is around almost 59.26%. When India's population is rapidly urbanizing, you can see there will be exponential growth in the water crisis, especially in cities. Good afternoon, students. Welcome to Vision Eyes. And today we'll be actually looking at a particular important topic. Like generally, this can actually be very helpful for your mains related point of view, okay, and also interview point of view. So there is a very good topic in the current affairs which actually speaks about the India's water paradox. Like basically, if you look at this, like there is a crisis and like there is the water stress in India, which whatever the reports we refer to or anything that we look at, the understanding of it goes way beyond that. Okay, so there is something more than what we actually see. So the water stress that we look at, there is the untold story behind that. So let us look into in this particular session. Me, Kasam Suhas, senior faculty here at Vision IS. I teach Geography, Environment and Disaster Management. So I would be giving you a perspective about that untold part or unseen side that we will be looking at. Okay, so that is something that we will look at. So here, let me give you a brief idea what we'll be looking at. See, firstly, like if you look at this particular narrative that is present in the society, that in the country, is that we have that water crisis in India. Of course, yes. But when you look at the national statistics and all those, that is dangerously oversimplified statistics that you can see, which is far distant from what is actually the complex and the reality. Okay, complex reality. So now let us deconstruct that and let us look at what are the challenges. Like is it just the insufficient resources or is there something more to it? Okay, and like see, we must have seen like most of the sort of headlines that actually represents about the figures that is showing or representing the figures which is regarding the per capita availability, right? So correctly, if you look into the problem, it is basically a very blunt instrument to look at with respect to the per capita per capita availability of water. Okay, so what you can see is here there is a granular analysis that we'll be doing today. I mean in-depth analysis that we'll be doing today, where we will see there is a trifacet problem, or that there is a failure on the three sides. Okay, that is responsible for the water crisis. Like for example, like there is the regional or geographical or variability in the water resources availability. Okay, maybe like places like Uttar Pradesh versus Rajasthan. Okay, or like let us say the northeastern region versus the northwestern region. So when you compare like the geographical expanse across the country, we can actually see there is geographical variability in the availability of water. Moreover, adding to this, you can also see the degree of over extraction or like contamination of groundwater is another problem. Okay, adding to this, there are some certain aspects that we have not looked into in any of the perspectives across. That is basically the policy and institutional failure that is creating this particular water crisis in India. Okay, so now we will actually draw certain data. We will look into those datas regarding the agricultural aspect and also the, the visible water crisis and the invisible water crisis. Like visible water crisis, as in it is about the surface water. When we speak about the invisible water crisis, it is about actually the aquifers, depleting aquifers. Okay, so like also with respect to the inefficiency of urban planning, urban infrastructure. Okay, so we'll be looking into those things through data visualizations. And also let us look into a critical perspective of the government policies, like it can be agricultural subsidies, or anything like unsustainable utilization of water and the fuel demand and several other things. So now in this particular perspective, what we'll be seeing is about the fragmented governance that is responsible for water crisis. Adding to it shall be the aspect where we'll be looking at the simplistic national level interventions that can sort of resolve this issue or bring a solution to this. Okay, so we'll be looking at that part. So now, like how the technological modernization and how actually the policy reforms and empowerment of the communities, all these things can actually act like a solution or for the crisis. That particular aspect we'll be looking at. Okay, so let's start deconstructing the narrative here. So now, when you look at this here specifically, what I would say is, like the first thing here is that, see, the basic aspect is that the public is aware of India's water situation, right? We look into the national statistics and we actually sort of think about the underlying crisis and imagine about the underlying crisis in some parts of India, and other parts we are experiencing the water crisis. Okay, so now this severity is something that you can see through the per capita availability. This is a misleading metric. Okay, I would say this is actually a misleading metric because, see, India is actually home to 18% of the world's population. But what we have is just the 4% of the freshwater resources. Now think the resource to population distribution, how skewed it is, right? So on the other hand, like see, if I have to tell you, there has been consistent decline in the per capita water availability. Okay, so we have already like fallen below what is called as the water stress zone. See, if for example, any country in that or any country's population is getting, like let us say, less than 1,700 cubic meters per person per year, okay, then that is called water stressed, and we have crossed that limits already. Okay, so the present, as per 2021 statistics, what we have, the per capita availability of water is around 1,486 meter cube, or cubic meter of water. Okay, but it is estimated by 2030 2031 we would be falling to like 1,367 cubic meter of water. Okay, so that means we have actually come down the water, I mean we have already fallen below the water stress line, and we are still declining in the numbers and going towards that, which actually speaks about something acute water stress. Okay, so now looking at this blunt instrument of per capita availability, it is actually hiding a lot of other important dynamics that is falling behind as the reason of water crisis. So now, for instance, I'll tell you how is it variable. Okay, let us look at that part. See, now, when you look at this part, I'll tell you simple. The Ganga Brahmaputra river basin, right? The Ganga and Brahmaputra river basin is actually home to 60% of India's renewable water resources. Is that clear? It is home to India's 60% of the renewable water resources, and especially I'm speaking about the surface water. On the other hand, if you look at Tamil Nadu is under absolute scarcity because despite they receive significant rainfall, but still that particular amount of rainfall is not sufficient to cater to the needs of the population. Okay, so Tamil Nadu is under absolute scarcity. Okay, so now think about this. 60% of the surface water in Ganga Brahmaputra basin, and states like Tamil Nadu, states like Rajasthan, states like Gujarat, okay, states like Madhya Pradesh, and Karnataka, these places, Andhra Pradesh, these places are facing the higher crisis. Okay. Now, so let us focus beyond these national numbers that we look at. Okay. So, where do we look at now? We'll be looking at the localized distribution and the management failures that is responsible for the water crisis. So, if I have to tell you in another word, like basically the localized distribution and the management failures are the two important drivers, of water crisis in India. Okay. So now, see, first thing, let me speak about this part. A landscape of diverse water challenges. See, when you look at this, like, landscape, if we look at the landscape is very much uneven, right? So the diversity is defined by the landscape. So now, see, very simple thing. If you look at this, across the regions, we do not have same availability of water. Is that clear? And also across the time. Like, for example, like, see, if I have to tell you, first, let us start with the temporal diversity. That means with respect to time. Okay. With respect to time, what you can see is basically that there are like only 4 months in a year where we happen to get sufficient amount of rainfall, and that is the monsoonal season, right? And now, see, if you look at the annual precipitation for India, it is approximately like 4,000 billion cubic meters of water. Okay. And 4,000 billion cubic meters of rainfall, that amount of water is concentrated only in 3 to 4 months. Okay. And you can also see, like, out of that 4,000 billion cubic meters, 95% is concentrated in those 4 months, and remaining 5% is from the rest of the 8 months. Okay. Now, if you look at this further, see, like, let me tell you something, like, there is certain basic infrastructural and management failures. Okay. Like in harnessing that 95% of the amount of water that we get during those 3 to 4 months. Like simple, out of, like, let us take the 6,000 as a round figure, 4,000 as a round figure. Out of that 4,000 billion cubic meters of water that we receive in a year, 95% is concentrated in the 3 to 4 months. Yes. On the other hand, India can actually only, like, hold 6% of its annual rainfall in the form of reservoirs or any other storage systems. Now imagine 6% of 4,000 billion cubic meters is thus the capacity that is built in India for storing the water. Okay. But if you take like some developed countries that are in the arid basins, okay, arid river basins, they have strategically built their infrastructure in such a manner they can hold almost 250% of their annual rainfall in the reservoirs. So think about this, 250%. Suppose if they are receiving like just, let us say, 500 billion cubic meters of rainfall, then they can hold 250% of it. Okay, that can be said somewhere around 1,250, right? 1,250 they can hold, 1,250 billion cubic meters. But what is India doing? Only 6%. Okay, so that is the biggest infrastructural failure. And adding to this, you can see this failure has like an estimated amount of somewhere around like 1,200 billion cubic meters of water that actually flows into the oceans and the seas, okay, every year, unutilized. Every year. So, like for example, this is the idea that we can look at through an example. Simple. River Godavari. River Godavari carries huge amount of water into the Bay of Bengal unutilized. That is the reason you can see Andhra Pradesh has been consistently working and fighting and trying to establish the Polavaram project. Okay, so like the completion of it can actually hold good amount of potential in enriching the surrounding agricultural areas by storing this water. And also, like, it can sort of facilitate the provision of the potable water for domestic purpose. Okay, but you can see much of it is going in vain. On the other hand, let us look at the geographical disparity now. When we look at the geographical disparity, we have studied, I mean, you must have studied in geography regarding the monsoons, right? So, the water availability is not uniform across India, correct? So, what you can see is there are places in India like the humid northeastern region, okay, that receives approximately 3000 millimeters of rainfall in a year, but what you can see is, on the other hand, the semi-arid regions of the northwest India that receives hardly 300 millimeters of rainfall per year. Okay, so it is 10 times more than the northwest India that is received by northeast India. Okay, now this vast differences that you can see is applicable for entire India. Okay, in short, if I have to tell you, in the peninsular India, the rainfall on the western part is higher than the eastern part, and in extra peninsular India, the rainfall in the eastern part is more than the western part. This is the geographical disparity that you can see with respect to monsoonal distribution. Okay, so now, like, adding to this is the brief period of rainfall. Is that clear? Adding to this complexity is the brief period of rainfall. Now, let us look at the further aspects. So, see, this is what I was actually telling you. So, the regions on the northwest has very less amount of rainfall compared to the northeast. And so is the case here. What you can see is the amount of rainfall reduces. The amount of rainfall basically reduces from here to here and from here to here. Is that clear? So, this is the disparity that you can see. So, now the simple aspect that you can think about is India's water challenge is now highly localized. With this amount of diversity and disparity, both temporally and spatially or geographically, basically, right? So, both temporally and spatially, if you see, this is saying or establishing a fact that the water crisis or the water challenge of India is highly localized, and it is not just one factor, but it is multidimensional, and almost all the dimensions we will be looking at here, and they are deeply interconnected. Okay, so this cumulatively affects the availability of water, both as surface water as well as the groundwater. Is that clear? Now, like, see, let us look at the hotspots of the surface water stress. Is that clear? So now let us look at the hotspots of the surface water stress. So, see, this was the map I had to show you. So, because we have spoken about the temporal disparity, 80 to 95% of India's annual rainfall is just in 3 to 4 months. And geographical disparity, this is the same thing. Arid western part receives only 300 to 500 mm, and the humid eastern part receives up to 3000 mm per year. Okay, so this is something that you can see. Moreover, you can look at this map. So this region is the one that receives more than 250 centimeters of rainfall. But how about this region? How about this region? Okay, let us consider this together. This region receives hardly 300 mm, and this region receives 3000 mm. Is that clear? So this is something that you can see. Now, see, this scenario constructs for a competition for surface water. Okay, particularly in the economically productive region, Punjab, Haryana. You know about the Yamuna Satluj link? There's a fight between that. Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, Kaveri issue, right? So you can see several states in India are fighting for water. Okay, now there is this World Resource Institute that actually indicates that almost 55%, roughly 54 to 55% of India is facing the extreme water crisis, especially the surface water. Okay, 55% of India is facing surface water crisis, and especially if you look at this, 40% of the annually available surface river water that you should see. Like surface water, let us say river, lakes, streams are basically disrupted, and because it is like overutilized in the areas. Okay, so this is something that you can look at. Moreover, see, visualize one thing that you need to look at through that map. You can visualize it, like also you can look into it. Basically, there are extremely high stress areas, that is like the northwestern India, and like you can also see as a paradox, like this northwestern India is the breadbasket of India, right? So the states of Punjab and Haryana are the breadbasket but the hotspot of water stress. Clear? Now when you look at this, these two states, Punjab and Haryana, actually produces more than 50% of the Indian government's rice supply, and more than 85% of Indian government's wheat stocks. Is that clear? So this actually sort of provides more than 50% of Indian government's rice supply, and also more than 85% of Indian government's wheat stocks. Okay, so now see, think about this. Rice, a water intensive crop. This northwestern India is extremely, like a water crisis area, which is a hot spot for water stress. Look at the paradox, right? So now if you look at this, if you look at the cause and effect relationship, what you can understand is, why do they grow? Why do they actually grow rice and wheat? Think about this. They grow rice and wheat because there is the government policy called minimum support price, which can procure how much ever of the yield that is produced on the land with respect to rice and wheat, right? And that is the reason that is policy driven cropping that you can see in this region, and that is actually sort of like demanding more water because they are water intensive crops. Okay, so this is something that you can understand from this particular, the as the title says, it's a tale of two Indias. Okay, it's a tale of two Indias. Okay, so now on the other hand, let us look at this part. This is going to show you the invisible crisis now. What is that invisible crisis? The invisible crisis is about the groundwater stress, or the groundwater collapse, or the groundwater depletion. Okay, now from this chart you can see here, see, this represents the safe zones, I mean percentage of safe areas, and this represents the overexploited areas. This is critical areas, this is semi-critical areas. Okay, so this is just to show you the percentage wise, okay, the percentage wise distribution. Here, see, the surface water is visible to us. So the stress is visible through the dry reservoirs, like it is shown in most of the TV channels or news channels, right? So it is shown through the dry reservoirs, it is shown through the dry rivers. Okay, but how about this groundwater? It is invisible and it is collapsing. Okay, now it is beneath the surface, so we don't understand it. And for a fact, let me tell you this, India is the world's largest user of groundwater, which you can see 90% of the groundwater that we extract is going for agriculture, basically irrigation. Okay, and India is the world's largest user of groundwater. Okay, now on the other hand, if you look at the rate of extraction, the rate of extraction has already surpassed the natural ability of replenishment or recharge of groundwater. Okay, so like for example, certain data actually shows there are 4,000 groundwater level, 4,000 groundwater wells, where you can see out of those 4,000 groundwater wells, the data has, I mean the research has studied, within that 54% of them have experienced the decline in the last 7 years of observation period. Okay, where it is almost dropping by more than 1 meter, by more than 1 meter every year. per year. Okay, so now you can see, like especially the northwest is very much vulnerable, and 58% of the wells that were studied in the northeast have been showing this trend of decline of minimum of 1 meter per year. Okay, so also, like you can see, this central groundwater board happened to, like sort of say that the national, I mean 2023, their latest assessments actually say that the national stage for groundwater extraction is, like around almost 59.26%. According to this report only, they have actually surged around 73.14% of their assessment area says that they are safe. That is what we have seen. Okay, assessment area is based on, like taluks or districts, or not districts, sorry, taluks or blocks. At the block level or the taluk level, they have conducted the research, and according to Central Groundwater Board, like almost 73.15%, okay, is safe. Is that clear? And moreover, if you look at the national average, okay, the national average, by showing this 73.1% or 73.2% as safe, is actually masking the severity of the crisis. Okay, so you can see this problem has to be learnt at the local level. This problem has to be seen or conceptualized at a specific area. So highly populated and agriculturally important or critical areas, when you look at, there you have, per, like if you take the northwest region alone, you will see the same more than 70% will be stressed. Okay, so let me tell you, there were, like as per the latest data, there were 736 taluks and blocks which were identified to be overexploited, and you can see these were concentrated in Punjab, Haryana and Rajasthan. That is the northwestern India, where they have extracted, or let us say their rate of extraction is like almost 100% of its recharge capacity. Matlab, iska meaning ye hai, they are extracting that much that is never going to be feasible for the natural rate of replenishment to catch up. Okay, that is the thing. That means, like basically if I say, like if you are extracting 2 liters, the replenishment rate is less than 1 liter. Okay, so this is the thing. So now, on the other hand, around 11% of the total units that was actually studied by the Central Groundwater Board shows that out of those 11% fall under the critical and semi-critical areas. I mean semi-critical classification. So here what you can see is, in these areas basically the farmers have started to drill deeper day by day because the water level is collapsing. Groundwater level is collapsing. So this is adding to the concentrated crisis in the area. Now see, there are, like this way, if you think about, there are pockets of overexploited areas, there are critical units, there are semi-critical units, but all of them show the same localized problems. Okay, if you understand, it is showing the same localized problems. So now, like further, if we have to see, there is one more aspect, that is so far what we have seen regarding the groundwater is the collapse of the quantity of groundwater. But what we will be seeing now is basically see, what we'll be seeing now is basically the quality of water. Okay, so when you look at the quality of water, India is ranking 120th global ranking out of how many countries? 122 countries. Out of 122 countries. So we are at the bottommost point. There are only 2 countries below us. Okay, so now see, let me tell you, 70% of India's water is contaminated. 70% of India's water is contaminated, and that is the reason we are ranking 120th globally out of the 122 countries in water quality index. Okay, in the water quality index. So now, like that means I can easily say almost like 100 million people. 100 million people are living in areas where the water that they get is below the national standards. Okay, and this is a bigger crisis. So it is very much bigger that we have to look into the cause of it. When we look into the cause of it, see, this aspect is the result of like over extracting of groundwater. Okay, there is over extracting of groundwater. That is the reason behind contamination of water. See, when you look at this, for example, in agriculture, we use or let us say use would be a very small word, we overuse the nitrogen based fertilizers, correct? We overuse the nitrogen based fertilizers, and this, in the name of agricultural runoff, is like sort of increasing the nitrate levels in the water bodies. That's first way. Okay, and like 2024 there was a report again by the Central Groundwater Board where it says it has tested 20% or specifically 19.8% of groundwater samples across, where it has shown like matlab, out of all the places it has tested, around 20% of the places has shown like greater than the national standards of nitrate levels. Okay, with specific aspect, if I have to tell you, the number of districts that is exhibiting that excessive nitrates is like in 2017 it was 359 districts, and in 2023 it is 440 districts. So instead of reducing it, what are we trying to do is increase it. So these 440 districts have been affected. Okay, so these 440 districts have been critically affected. And if you look at these contaminated water areas are widespread and concentrated in the states of Rajasthan, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Okay, so Rajasthan has 49% of such districts and Karnataka has 48, and you can see Tamil Nadu is having somewhere around 37%. So these districts in these states have showed exceeding the permissible limits of nitrate. Okay, have exceeded the permissible limits of nitrate. Did you understand this? And further, yeah. So now this is what we have been seeing. 19.8% of groundwater samples show nitrates above the safe limits. The contamination particularly is widespread in Rajasthan, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Okay, so this is something that you can see. Adding to this basically what you can see is that not just this, there are several other contaminants that is responsible for the lower quality or very substandard quality of the water available. See, for example, it can be arsenic pollution, it can be lead pollution, it can be the nitrate pollution and so on. Okay, so this is something visually it is showing, or let us say the stats that we have not seen so far is not just about the quantity, but also quality. Okay, both of it. So now let us look into the root causes. See, when we look at the root causes, first thing, the regional disparities as we have studied so far. The second thing is the systemic vulnerabilities. Okay, so looking at this now, there should be some important aspects that we need to that we need to venture into, which are the direct result of a systemic as well as institutional failure, along with something deeper into the flawed policies and the governance models that is responsible for 100 million people plus living in the substandard, or let us say are surviving with the substandard water. Okay, so that is something. So let us look into that deeper. Now comes the policy pitfalls regarding agriculture and the groundwater depletion. So now see, first thing, when we look at this, the most important and the single largest driver for water crisis, both in terms of quantity and quality, is the agriculture sector. Okay, it is the agriculture sector. Here, 80 to 90% of the groundwater extraction happens in this sector. So now, if you look at this, there is a sort of immense consumption that you can see here. It is not just due to the farmers' ignorance, but the government, incentives. Okay, it's also because of the government incentives. The simple thing, again, let me repeat, let us go into that particular aspect, the minimum support price. The minimum support price is basically provided to the farmers to ensure that the food security is provided. Like that was the crux of introducing it during the time of Green Revolution. Okay, but over the time, what you can see is it has been guaranteeing the purchase of water intensive crops like the rice and wheat. So the another aspect to it is not just the purchase of rice and wheat, but at a fixed price. Okay, so this is been responsible for overproduction of these two grains, that is rice and wheat. If you know this, a minimum of 30%, a minimum of 30% of the grains is grown more than the national needs, and the emergency buffer requirements or the stocks cumulatively. That means, like for the national needs as well as the emergency requirement, if we actually have to keep 100 tons of rice and wheat, let us say individually, or let us take rice, then how much we are actually having is 130 tons. So we have 30% more. Now, my question is, if we have 30% more, what is the incentive that is actually making it grow so much? The incentive is very simple, the subsidized electricity, okay, that is supporting extraction of water, which can support indeed the water intensive crops like rice and wheat. And once you grow rice and wheat, how much ever you grow, the government of India considers or procures it at a fixed price through MSP. Okay, so here this is a cycle that is generated, and this perpetuating, it is a self-perpetuating cycle where the water table will fall, farmers will eventually drill deeper, which will increase the cost of extraction. There you will have to give fuel subsidy now. Okay, so like in that way, if you see, like one side you are giving fuel subsidy, the other side you are actually taking at MSP, and on the other side you are actually storing almost like every year the farmers are producing 30% more than the requirement, and that is also not properly maintained and it goes in waste, food wastage. Okay, so this actually is a very much a self-perpetuating cycle. Okay, so recently there was a research in Punjab. Okay, Punjab alone, the rice procurement that happens under MSP accounts for like basically at least 50% of the groundwater table decline that has happened in the past 34 years. Okay, over the past 34 years, if the decline, let us say, is like 35 meters or let us say 20 meters, then the reason for it is the rice procurement under MSP. At least 50% the reason is rice procurement under MSP. Now, on the other hand, you can also see Madhya Pradesh. These are the case studies as per the researchers. I'm actually showing it to you in front of. Okay, so if you take Madhya Pradesh introduced wheat procurement. Okay, almost in the late 2000s, and you can see that has been responsible for like roughly 6% of dry wells in Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so this is something you can see. To be specific about this, see, this is how you are looking at. This is the annual subsidy cost in dollars. Okay, and this is the groundwater depletion that when equated to, like, see, it is very wrong to actually equate it to the economic good, Jesa. But otherwise, if you equate it to, you can see this is the percentage of loss, I mean economical terms, and that is the environmental damage it is causing. Okay, so this is something that we need to look at. Let us look at this in detail now. See, for example, if you have to grow rice, okay, per kg of rice to grow will require at least 3000 to 5000 liters of water. Okay, and is there MSP for this? Yes, of course. And that is the biggest driver of the groundwater depletion in Punjab and Haryana. Okay, adding to this, wheat. Wheat, if you see, it requires for 1 kg of wheat to be grown, it requires almost 1000 to 2000 liters of water, and that is also under MSP, and that is also contributing to the significant decline in groundwater. And further, you take pulses. Pulses require somewhere around 500 to 600 liters of water per kg, and that is also under MSP. And of course, we can say 500 to 600 liters of water compared to rice and wheat is a less water intensive crop, but it has been displaced. Okay, it has been replaced by water intensive crops. Not many people are growing pulses. That is a problem. Okay, adding to this, next, let us take sugarcane. Sugarcane requires almost 2000 to 3000 liters of water per kg. Okay, but looking at the MSP, there is FRP, so let us keep it in a variable zone. But you can see that is also contributing to the water, water scarcity and water stress in Maharashtra. Okay, cotton requires 2500 to 3000 liters of water, and yes, that is under MSP, and that is the water stress reason in Gujarat and Maharashtra. Okay, so the data is actually showing you that connect, correct? That data is actually showing you the connect which is responsible for the immense impact, okay, immense impact, 1 on the annual subsidy cost, 2 on the groundwater depletion, and 3 the environmental damage it is costing. Like for example, I told you the surface water contamination and all those such way. Okay, so now what is this particular aspect? See, is it benefiting? What is the particular aspect? As in, I'm asking you this one. Is it really benefiting all the farmers? Think about this. At the cost of this much, is it actually benefiting all the farmers? No. See, only a small group of farmers, like say 15%, 15%, 15% of the paddy cultivators and 10% of wheat cultivators are being benefited by MSP based procurement. Not everybody. Okay, so this now, if you look at very clearly, this is responsible for environmental degradation, fiscal inequity, and social inequity. Okay, so now all these are actually the policy driven environmental damage. Okay, policy driven environmental damage that is happening in India. Okay, on the other hand, if this is not just agriculture, but yes, if I say 90% of the contribution is by agriculture. Now let us look at the second one. Look at this, urban strain and fragmented governance. Now when you look at this here, when we speak about the urban strain and fragmented governance, see, very simple, there is India's population which is rapidly urbanizing. Okay, when India's population is rapidly urbanizing, you can see there will be exponential growth in the water crisis, especially in cities. And very clearly, if I have to tell you, like there are cities like Delhi or Chennai, which is actually relying on water resource, or let us say, which is relying on water supply from the distant sources which are hundreds of kilometers away. Okay, really distant sources which are hundreds of kilometers away. Okay, now at the same time, if you see, the local water bodies or even the groundwater is completely, either completely, as in I'm not saying the 100%, okay, but majority, it is either encroached for land development or sand mafia or anything like this, or it is actually contaminated. Is that clear? So now what happens is there is a dual negative effect that you can see. One side there is, like, uh, the available water that is actually not usable or not potable, and the another one is the cost to bring the water to the cities, to sustain the cities. There is one more the dual negative effect, or the important thing that we need to look at. First one, see, there is water scarcity and there is urban flooding. Think about this. What is the reason? The water scarcity is because the urban infrastructure is so short sighted that the concrete surfaces does not allow the surface to, like, sort of recharge the aquifers, because they are impervious. And because they are impervious and our monsoons are so heavy and it is concentrated in a short duration, that will actually flood the cities. Why? On the other hand, the drain capacity is also not up to the mark. Okay, so now this, added to this particular aspect, is the inefficiency in the urban management, urban water management. Okay, so if you look at this, the estimated approximately 72,368 million liters of sewage is generated on daily basis. And we just have 28% of it can be treated. We just have the capacity that can treat only 28% of it. Okay, so now think about this. On the other hand, like, even for example, let us say whatever is treated, that treated water, if you have to, like, see, that treated water is not generating any revenue much, because if you see this, like, there is the non-revenue water, which we call it as. The non-revenue water in India is approximately 38%. Okay, so that 38 to 40%. What is that non-revenue water? Non-revenue water actually refers to the leakages and wastages that is happening due to insufficient water infrastructure. Okay, like faulty pipes, okay, or like sort of lack of oversights into the water, what do you say, cleaning, okay, all these things. So this stands at 40%, and certain cities has non-revenue water that is 50%. Basically, if you think, like, there is a water supply and there is water leakage, that leakage is not going to bring any revenue for the local government. That is non-revenue water. Okay, so now on the other hand, see, what is the value of that particular non-revenue water? This is the value, 2.5 billion per year. That is the value in terms of economy. $2.5 billion. That is the economy. Okay. So now, see, there are cities in India like Chennai and Bangalore which have been facing, like, almost acute water stress, which is also, like, we can say, day zero warnings. Okay. And if you look at this, almost, like, this extends across the things, like, for example, the impervious surface, which is not allowing the groundwater recharge. Second one, the amount of sewage, or, like, the wastewater that is generated and how much is actually treated, and the non-revenue water, all these amounts to it. Okay, so that is something that you can look at. So moreover, we can also say there are, like, for example, certain socio-economic and environmental consequences also that is arising because of the water crisis. Okay, so let us look at that. Now, see. Now, okay. So, before we go into this, let me tell you the socio-economic and environmental consequences that is there. See, simple thing, the crisis of this water quality and quantity will have an impact on public health, livelihood, and also social stability. Because, see, almost 21% of the communicable diseases in India is due to the contaminated water. Between 2014 and 2018, there were, like, waterborne diseases related deaths, almost 12,000 deaths. That was the result of the contaminated water. Okay, and you can see even today the uh, diarrhea, typhoid, cholera, such water related diseases are killing approximately at least an estimated of 500 children who are under the age of 5 in India each day. That is the stat. Each day, 500 people. Okay, so I mean 500 under 5 children. Okay, this is the thing. So now, on the other hand, that is the perspective that we need to look at, the public health. On the other hand, let me tell you that water scarcity and also the inequitable distribution of water is the biggest trigger for social conflicts and tension. Like, for example, let me tell you, simple aspect. Where there is water crisis, there you have water mafia. Okay, like the sand mafia, there is water mafia. What is water mafia? Water mafia actually refers to these private water tanker owners who are like smuggling the water, clean water, and selling them at an exorbitant price. Very exorbitant price. So that is actually sort of exploiting the poor because it's a necessity, right? It's a necessary good, right? So now this is something that you can look at. On the other hand, like there was an instance in 2019 in Chennai during the water crisis. A woman was stabbed by a neighbor because there was a dispute over the borewell. Okay, so you can see such social conflicts and disagreements over like the water distribution, and all these things are very common. That is because of the water crisis. Adding to this, you can see in several areas where you have the canals. In the upper reaches of the canals, farmers are siphoning the water. Okay, they are stealing the water. Okay, so now illegally they are stealing the water, and that is like sort of like bringing an insecurity and sort of what do you call it as the uh, dirt in the than the required amount in the lower streams. Okay, so like basically if you look at this analysis, see why would farmers do it? Because basically water for a farmer is not just a necessity, but it is the foundation for their livelihood. It is the foundation for their livelihood, and also like any shortage in the availability of water can lead to crop failures. Okay, can lead to crop failures, economic distress, and famines, even farmer suicides. Not famines, I'm sorry, farmer suicides. Okay, so this is the thing. Clear? Now, if you look at this way, environmental and economic repercussions that you can see with this, in 2008, there was Niti Ayog's report, which actually said if the same rate of consumption patterns persist in India, I'm saying about 2018, not 2008, 2018. If the same rate of consumption patterns persist in India, then eventually you will see India's water demand will double by 2030. Okay, so like that is very much a big challenge to look at. And it also says potentially because of such water crisis, by 2030, we'll be losing almost 6 to 7% of our GDP. Okay, so that is something that you can look at. And yeah, basically in some places, if you look at environmental cost, the groundwater depletion is actually resulting in the land subsidence. Okay, the groundwater depletion is resulting in land subsidence. Because of such land subsidence, you can see there is damage to the critical infrastructure. Okay, and there the constructions become unsafe. The place to thrive will be challenging. Okay, this is what you can see. And adding to this, suppose for example, let us say the surface water is contaminated. If the surface water contaminates, then you can see or let us say on the other hand, adding to this, if the wetlands are disappearing, the surface water is contaminated, lakes are contaminated, then what will happen is eventually the health of the ecosystem and the biodiversity in that ecosystem is very negatively affected. Okay, you can see, let us say, like simple thing. Let us say if the surface water is affected, then what will happen is eventually it will force the wild animals to enter cities and villages in search of water. This will lead to man animal conflict. Okay, so this is something that you can see as the environmental cost. Okay, this is economic as well as environmental cost. Okay, now further, so let us look at the pathway to solution. Okay, so when you look at the pathway to secure water for future, we need to look at a framework that is more comprehensive. The first important thing is that we need to get some policy and governance reforms. Okay, like for example, like there are certain ambitious steps that is taken by government of India, which has been working very good, but little bit here and there some changes are required. Like for example, the Ministry of Jal Shakti in 2019, this was created by merging two ministries. Okay, so they are actually, this ministry is targeting at like sort of integrated approach to resolve the biggest challenge for India, that is the water challenge crisis, water crisis. Okay, and also under that we have, I mean, we have under the government of India, we have several programs, flagship programs like Jal Shakti Abhiyan. Okay, Jal Shakti Abhiyan was launched in 2019. It actually mobilizes the communities to harvest the rainwater and conserve the water. And similarly, there is Atal Bhujal Yojana, which is actually a community driven program. It is also supported by the World Bank, and you can see that happens to promote the sustainable groundwater management in especially 7 water stressed states. And we have Jal Jeevan Mission. This is also an initiative by the ministry. What you can see is it aims to provide like piped water connections to every household, okay, by 2024. And see, what you can see is here there are such ambitious steps that has been taken, but there are some changes that needs to be made. Because like for example, if you take Jal Shakti Abhiyan, it is sort of criticized by the scholars for its fragmented approach, because it is looking at district based approach rather than like scientifically or environmentally sound, like basin wise, or like the river basin wise approach. Okay, so the hydrological units are not considered, but the political boundaries like the districts are considered. Okay, so similarly, like you can see the national water policy of 2012, that is also sort of criticized, because the national policy of 2012, national water policy of 2012 actually treats water as an economic good. That's what I said, it should not be treated as an economic good. Okay, so that's going to hamper the equity of distribution. Okay, so that is something. So what needs to be done is, to address such challenges, we need to actually bring reforms, where the reform should look at integrated basin level approach to water management actually. Okay, so that is something that needs to be looked at. Okay, further, like certain technological interventions can also be seen. Okay, so like the technological interventions can be like for example, if we look at like Mumbai metropolitan region, here there are large scale wastewater treatment plants. Okay, like they are using advanced membrane bioreactors technology, where there are facilities that is like like in Worli, that is almost like 500 MLD plant. Okay, and the one in Bandra is actually 360 MLD plant. So these things technologically when applied, it can reduce the land footprint of treatment plants. Okay, and basically like the high quality treated water that comes can be used for industrial purposes at least. Okay, so that ways some amount of water sufficient, because industries are the second largest consumers in India after agriculture. So this way it frees up some good amount of potable water for the domestic use. Okay, and similarly you can also see like there are certain other technologies like modernize it through that can be modernizing the infrastructure like through technologies like GIS mapping, smart water meters, data analytics. Here these can actually sort of cut down the non-revenue water. Okay, that can actually cut down the non-revenue water and improve the efficiency in the system. And further, like there are certain companies like Digital Pani, okay, they are using IoT, Internet of Things, to actually reduce the operational cost. Okay, and also there is a satellite based technology, AMUSAT. Okay, AMSAT is a satellite based technology which can locate the groundwater resources up to 60 meters. Okay, so it is also having an accuracy of 90%, nothing less. It is having an accuracy of 90%. Adding to this, like we also have to bring some changes in agriculture. Like for example, we have to go beyond the inefficient flood irrigation methods, and we have to sort of look forward for water saving techniques like drip irrigation, micro irrigation techniques like sprinkle irrigation, all these things. Okay, that ways it can reduce the amount of water that is wasted in the name of irrigation, and it can also improve the crop yield. Okay, and further you can see there is Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which provides subsidies for adopting such technologies of micro irrigation, right? So these are some things, and adding to this we have the Bhuvan portal of ISRO, where it actually provides the scientific data of the groundwater prospects, clear, of the groundwater prospects and all those things. So this is at the policy level that needs to be looked at, and technological level. On the other hand, we can also see there is community led and behavioral change that can be looked as an initiative. Like for example, we need to empower the citizens and make them as active participants in the conservation of water. Okay, like for example, we have to revive the traditional water bodies and also make sure that rainwater harvesting is very effective. Okay, like for example, there is a village, Relegan Siddhi in Maharashtra. There, a community led rainwater harvesting has actually made the water, I mean, the village as more water secure. Okay, so on the other hand, there is NGO Tarun Bharat Sangh. This is in Alwar. Okay, this particular NGO in Alwar, Rajasthan. There is a village, and they have helped these villagers to build almost like 10,000 check dams and percolation tanks, which has literally transformed the barren land into lush, green, water-rich region. Okay, even Haryana government Saraswati model, they are building like reservoirs to store the flood water, and they are practicing. I mean, they are reviving the age-old practice and like benefiting the local farmers. Okay, so even there is community-based rainwater harvesting in Chennai, and institutional-based rainwater harvesting in Karnataka. Like in that is actually sort of promoting a degree of environmental awareness. Okay, so even companies like ITC and Tata Group, they are actually investing good amount of money on watershed management projects. Okay, so here these things actually not just conserve the water, but it will secure the rural livelihood. Okay, the villages. So that is something that you can see. So to conclude, what I would say is basically these are the pathways that we are looking at, and like this is the bottom up model that we need to look at. Okay, so that is something we need to look at. So to conclude, it is of course a crisis that needs to be resolved. Okay, so we need to actually like simply not just look into the problem as a scarcity, but we have to go to the localized causes and address all the multidimensional issues, so that there is the profound disparities that is seen and the poor management that is seen is addressed. Also, we need to sort of like think beyond. Okay, we need to think beyond just the per capita availability of water. Now, the simple thing is, for a country to possess sufficient water resources to sustain its large population, then we need to combine the fragmented governance. We need to actually sort of address the unsustainable agricultural practices. and bring a solution to inefficient urban infrastructure in the era of amplifying climate change. Okay, so this is something that we need to look at. So here the ultimate solution is way beyond the simple narratives that we see. So addressing the complex reality is the actual solution. So that is all about this particular topic. Thank you.